a saying within Bitcoin, I'm sure you're aware of. It's the final trade. I heard Saylor on a podcast recently, or maybe it was one of his backroom discussions in Nashville, where he's like, you spent 40 to 60,000 hours of your life making money. Maybe you should spend 100 learning how to keep it. And so I think that there's a little bit of a that playing out. And as the currency is debased, your ability to procure margins from the marketplace becomes perpetually harder. And so I think that also exacerbates the focus on trying to make a quick buck. Launch a startup, sell the startup, dump a bunch of coins, whatever the strategy may be, figure out how to make that money really quickly. And unfortunately, a lot of people, from my perspective, are overlooking the magnitude of the long-term returns in Bitcoin relative to essentially all of the other investable assets or any other thing that you could buy on planet Earth.
Yeah. The final trade is such a cool concept because, it's it really does put Wall Street on its heels, right?
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Chris Sullivan, who's a hedge fund manager, did the analysis on the S&P 500, right? And the dollar, depreciation of the dollar, right?
Adjusted,
so if you go back
adjusted for M2?
No, but if you go back to just sort of the loss of purchasing power of the dollar, this is the St. Louis Fed chart of the dollar from 1913 to today, and the dramatic loss in purchasing power. And you analyze that, right? It's losing purchasing power at an average of about 11.2% a year. And then if you look at the S&P 500, that say has an average annual return of say 9.2% a year.
Yep.
You can see that even the fiat mindset of the S&P being the ultimate savings tool, the ultimate way to hedge inflation, is still losing purchasing power.
Yeah, at 2% a year, which, as Saylor says, equates to a 35-year half-life. You lose half the money in 35 years. And people are stuck in this optical illusion where they think their assets are going up, but they're actually going down. You just can't see it because the metric, the dollar that you're measuring the value of the assets in, is bleeding energy faster than the asset is.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I tell people when I'm, talking about Bitcoin, which just seems like that's all I do, is I don't buy, you don't buy a vehicle to save your economic energy or project your purchasing power into the future, but people are doing that with houses. And I explained to them that what's happening with your house is the same thing that's happening with your car. You just can't see it because you're measuring the value of the house and the dollar's losing purchasing power so fast that the house is going up in dollar terms, but the car is going down in dollar terms. Everything on planet Earth other than Bitcoin is bleeding energy. It's going down in value in real terms. As Saylor puts it, they're all defective assets.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have with Bitcoin now, if we have a average rate of return of, let's just say 50%, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes lower than that, sometimes higher than that. When you think about that reframes everything. And I think this is probably why you and I are in this 100% allocation.
Totally.
Because it reframes everything in regards to the way you value every other possible investment, career path, anything you can do to generate economic value for yourself and your family. And so when you start measuring the world against Bitcoin, it really clarifies for you what's important and what adds value and what doesn't.
Totally. I was listening to a Jeff Booth podcast recently. I believe it was with Walker, and he was talking about ego death capital, and he's projecting essentially for the next 15 years a 45% compound annual growth rate for Bitcoin. So any capital that they're going to invest into a business, they need to be expecting to get a yield higher than 45%. And so yeah, that's a really big deal, and it's hard for people to wrap their mind around that reality. Yep. And then you got the Peter Schiffs of the world dispelling a bunch of FUD, and you got people on mainstream media. And I believe to a certain degree that there's a psyop taking place. When I saw Jamie Dimon on CNBC mispronounce Satoshi's name, he called him Satoshi and said, well, maybe Satoshi is going to come back and double the supply to 42 million coins. The first thing I thought is this guy is lying. He is the
Yeah.
CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He's famous for waking up early and reading every morning. You're going to tell me that this guy doesn't understand Bitcoin in the most basic of levels? Because the only way to
Right.
get somebody's Bitcoin is to sell them a shit coin or to
Mm-hmm.
get them to not buy it. That's the only way to dilute the value of the asset, is to prevent people from buying it. And so I do
Yeah,
think that there's a
absolutely.
little bit of that happening, in an attempt to slow this thing down and allow people with a lot of power and resources to figure out how they're going to grapple with this. It's kind of like a freedom grenade was thrown into the room of all of the overlords, and everybody's like, "Oh shit! Like, nobody move. We gotta don't touch it. Let's figure out how to deal with this thing. It's gonna rip some faces off. Like, nobody move. We're gonna
Yep.
calmly discuss how we're gonna deal with this."
Yep. 100%. And I know, a lot of people either don't know or forgot that JP Morgan had a whole division that was doing a ton of research and development on the Ethereum blockchain that they then later sold to Consensus,
Interesting.
which, happened to take place, I'm sure, with a significant amount of ETH,
Yeah.
and happened to take place before they transitioned to proof of stake. So, you can connect those dots however you want.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to think into the future of a staking protocol basically being dominated by those with the largest stake, and wherever those coins are being staked by the largest players, essentially having control of this chain. So I've always seen Ethereum as just Wall Street 2.0 with self-custody. And but there's no real innovation there. It's really about taking the true innovation, which is Bitcoin, porting it over to how do we use this to generate Wall Street in this new digital fabric that allows us to be a part of that momentum and be a part of that future digital growth, while at the same time eliminating some of the transfer agents and the custodians that the big banks probably don't need anymore now that something like Ethereum exists.
Yeah, totally. Very well said. And I think of it as like an extension of fiat. It's just an additional centralizing, consolidating protocol or force. It's no better than fiat. If anything, it's a little scummier in some ways, in my humble opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, I want to step back. Like I watched your presentation in Prague,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the first time I heard your full story. And it really hit me immediately as like the similarities of sort of like the experiences you've had in your life that led you to Bitcoin, and my own experiences and other Bitcoiners that I've got to know over the years. And that's sort of this, I like to describe as this history of, number one, losing faith in the traditional financial system.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, like losing faith in well, and in your case, like the pharmaceutical industry,
Totally.
right? Through the experience with your mom.
Yep.
And sort of these personal losses that we all sort of carry with us into the future. It's like, to me, that's sort of like priming the pump,
Totally.
or waking an individual up to get to the point where they, like, when they find Bitcoin, they go, this is it. This is why
Yeah.
I'm here. This is the answer. And I think prior, at least for myself and many others I've talked to, prior to Bitcoin, we were all a little bit nihilistic, like just like, how, like, the future is screwed. Like, we're behind in so many ways, and how are we ever going to dig out of this hole? And then Bitcoin is all of a sudden this beacon, right? This light at the end of the tunnel. We're like, I have to get there as fast as possible.
So you've heard Bitcoin is the new gold rush by now. As world leaders on all sides have endorsed it as the future of money, and now you're looking to get started, we'll show you how. It's actually easier than you think. First, go to your nearest ByteFederal ATM and turn your cash to coin. ByteFederal has over 1,200 locations around the country with the highest daily limits. Go to our website, ByteFederal.com, to find the nearest ATM to you. Log in to any wallet, then create an account, deposit your US cash, and instantly convert it to Bitcoin. That's it. We are the only U.S. manufacturer and operator in the Bitcoin ATM industry, and our U.S.-based live customer service is second to none. Go on, give it a whirl, and don't get left behind. Click the link below.